2 years ago, Americans watched in horror as a crisis unfolded at the Kabul airport.
There's desperation and anguish.
More than 80,000 Afghans have since arrived in America, but this story is still unfolding. I'm Andrea Smartin. In my new podcast, Stranger Becomes Neighbor, we'll find out what happens to these new arrivals in our communities. Who would help our newest neighbors? Follow us at kslpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen.
You're listening to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction. We've got Nicole Hawkins in. She's with Center for Change. We're talking about eating disorders and recovery. She shared her story in the first half. And now we're talking about the 10 things you need to pack in your recovery backpack. We're going to start with number 5 right now. So, Nicole, what's 5?
So 5 is what I really kind of think of as doing self-care. And so when you think about your cell phone battery. When it gets down to like 3% left or even 10%, I'm already panicking because I'm a mom. I'm like, does anyone have a charger? I'm sending emails in the building. Can I use anyone's charger? Do we do that with our mental health? Do we do that with ourselves? So I know in my recovery, it was only when I was struggling that all of a sudden I thought I better start taking care of myself. So I really work on teaching my patients to start taking care of themselves daily. So what does that look like? What does self-care look like? For some patients, it can be taking a bath. For my eating disorder patients, that can be, triggering too. It can be going on a hike, having coffee with a friend. What does self-care look like for you? You write it down. And then if you remember on number 1, we talked about having structure and a schedule. Mm-hmm. You actually schedule in self-care time.
Which seems like
if you don't schedule it, it won't happen.
Yeah.
Right. And I talk with my patients about that all the time. I think I should get a kickback from Google because I've got everybody on a Google Calendar because you can put in your colors and different things and self-care, meditation, those sorts of things that we teach our patients. If they don't schedule it, it won't happen. Yeah.
To talking about survivor analogy, I think self-care is one of the things that gets voted off the island first as well.
Exactly.
Because it doesn't seem like it's essential or a necessity. It's like, oh, no, I've got kids. These guys they all need my time worse than I do. So I'm going to give to everybody else. And then whatever's left at the end of the day, if I've got some time for self-care, I'll do it. But it's not that important. But in reality, it's very important.
Yeah, I think it becomes the most important when you're trying to recover. And I tell a lot of my patients, they've been in treatment and, they could stay with us for a couple weeks or even months. And they feel like, well, now I'm behind on school. I have to get back to work. And they throw themselves in. And they literally drowned in recovery because recovery isn't the main focus. If recovery is not your main focus, it's not going to happen. And so self-care has to be built into your life. And then, so I have them have a plan of what self-care I'm going to do and what it's going to look like. And so then that brings us to the next one, and that's kind of the self-correction, but having a self-correction plan. So I'll give you an example. When I was in my eating disorder, if I skipped a meal, I would have to have a plan of how I was going to make up those calories. And so it could be I would have to drink a nutritional supplement or I'd eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with an apple and chips. Like I had a plan. If I didn't do this, I would do this. Well, how about this scenario, though? What if I eat dinner and then after dinner I binge and then I purge? What's my self-correction? Because how do I make that up?
I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe what I have to do is write a paper on what triggered me, and, in the DBT world, a behavioral chain analysis, but what triggered me? Why was I vulnerable? What could I have done differently? Could I have reached out for help sooner? Really looking at the behavior. But when I used to make a mistake, I would just push it aside and say, tomorrow's a new day. Or I'm going to recover on Monday, or I'm going to start over, next week. And so learning to start over within the day, within the moment, not starting over the next day, learning to self-correct that next day.
Because in addiction, sometimes tomorrow never comes.
Exactly.
Whether it's making the wrongs right or it's never promised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And so learning to do that self-correction, I think, is critical, and I think we've got to have it a part, of what we do. So the next one I like to have them kind of add to their backpack is service, extending ourselves beyond ourselves. So for me, that became critical. It became part of my structure. But number one, I didn't think I was competent in anything. I didn't think I was good at anything.
Even after graduating college and doing all these things?
Yeah, even after having a PhD, I went up and took a gardening job at first. I still was like doubting myself and not thinking I was good enough.
Do you feel like that perception of yourself goes back before the eating disorder? Was that something that you struggled with, self-confidence, when you were younger? Or do you feel like that was more a product of the disorder that you were struggling with?
I think I always was a perfectionist. So if I got an A, that wasn't good enough. I had to get the best grade in the class. So it was always, it's kind of like, again, that low self-esteem and trying to either get the best grades or look the best or be the thinnest, hoping that will fill up my bucket. Well, if your bucket has a hole in the bottom,
nothing's filling it up.
Yep, nothing's filling it up. So then for the longest time, I used to think, well, I need to figure out why I got an eating disorder, and then I can recover. So if I figure out why I got it, then I can get better. What I teach my patients is I don't necessarily care why you got it. I want to figure out why you keep it, why it serves you now. Why do you have to have it? And so that was kind of the work I had to do, is like, how is it serving me now? And how it was serving me once I had it in college is it was numbing me out. I quit caring about things as much. I didn't care about grades as much. I didn't care about people pleasing as much. I was totally numb. So you think about like this vase, this glass vase. And if we're not dealing with any issues in our life and we're just shoving everything down, big traumas, little traumas, we're just shoving everything in this glass vase. Well, we're either going to eventually explode and have a nervous breakdown, or we're going to develop a lid. And that lid's our addiction. And then it keeps everything so nicely contained. We don't feel anything. And then that lid is so tight that new things happen to us. They bounce right off. They don't impact us. So I think for me, always being a perfectionist, never feeling good enough, the eating disorder was the lid that I no longer cared. I was just numbed out. All those things I strive for. When I was in high school, I worked on the governor's campaign, senators' campaigns. I was completely into politics. I went to Washington, D.C. I developed the eating disorder. It was almost like blinders went over my eyes. I didn't care about anything anymore except for calories, exercise, and my weight. So I literally lost my identity. I had no plans of being a psychologist. I was going to be in politics. I was going to be an attorney. So it totally changed, my whole focus that way. So I think that's important. So looking at service, so to go back, so what I did is I started volunteering. I volunteered in ERs. I volunteered in nursing homes. A lot of my patients go walk dogs for the Humane Society. Even if you can commit to doing 30 minutes a week or 2 hours a month, whatever it is, extending yourself outside of yourself.
Service does feel so good.
Yeah, it really does. And just simple little things we can do. So it becomes, again, if we go back to number one in that structure, now we're adding self-care, we're adding service. We're kind of building these layers of different things.
We're building our house again.
I know, we kind of are, and we're having a blueprint of things that are going to help us. And again, if we go back to a hand, if we try to catch a ball and we're missing a couple fingers, we can maybe do it, but not very well. It's so much better to have a whole hand. And so when you think about this backpack and this parachute, we want every panel to have something in it. So that way we're more protected. But for a lot of us, and what I was kind of victim of, is I was going to do everything myself. And I didn't want any help. And I didn't want to be vulnerable. So I really like to teach my patients the vulnerability is a strength and to really embrace it.
It's a superpower.
It really is.
I talk to Dr. Matt all the time. I go, being vulnerable is a superpower.
People like you more if you're vulnerable.
Absolutely.
You're attracted to people that'll share their truth, that'll be honest. If people are fake and phony, we don't want to be around them.
Well, and
there's no real connection that is made with a person's persona.
Wearing a
But
mask.
When a person opens up and they're authentic, and we see that they're willing. I think one of the things that attracts people to Casey, by the way, is his authenticity and talking about his real thoughts and feelings. And I've had people ask me, is that how Casey really is? I'm like, yeah, that's how Casey really is. And then it makes you feel like you can be that way, right? I can tell Casey whatever's on my mind about my life, and I never feel judged. So authenticity is essential to help people kind of take that next step in their recovery.
All right, so what number are we on our parachute? I've been calling it a backpack.
We might be on 6. Well, it's packing our parachute in our backpack.
Okay, this would be a good time to take a break. We're going to figure out where we are, what's in our backpack, and we'll be right back.
I'm Dave Cawley, investigative journalist and host of the podcast Cold. In October of 1985, a woman named Cherie Warren left work at a busy Salt Lake City office
to meet her estranged husband at a downtown auto dealership.
She never made it home. Cherie's car surfaced weeks later in Las Vegas.
In the parking lot of a hotel casino.
No one knows how it got there.
Strange. It was strange.
Both Cherie's estranged husband and her boyfriend raised suspicion for investigators.
I kind of thought that he might have done something.
But no arrests were ever made. In Cold Season 3, we dig into double lives, make new connections in the case, and examine the difficulty raised by reasonable doubt.
We want answers just as much as anyone else.
They have creeps like that now too, so nothing's changed.
That's the new Cold Season 3, The Search for Cherie, now available anywhere you get your podcasts.
All right, so I think the last one we were at, we did...
we just did spirituality.
Yes.
Yeah, we just did spirituality. So now we're going to talk about one that's a pretty big one, and healthy relationships. So looking at our relationships, looking at toxic relationships, people with eating disorders and people in addictions tend to seek out other people that are unhealthy.
You know, when I was in a recovery center, I remember sitting down in a process group, and this one guy was going, I got to find all new friends. I got to find all new friends because they're the ones I used with. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, I don't need to find new friends. My friends are going to be happy that I'm not drinking. They're going to want me back in their circle. I mean, there was people that I would drink with, and I knew that they were just there because we were going to get a house together. But my true friends, I didn't have to find new true friends. They wanted me to be sober, you know. And so I think there's two sides of that coin. But you got to find out who your true friends are, because I can tell you what, since I've been in recovery and been doing this podcast, I have never got a call from the bar going, "Hey, where have you been, Casey?"
Yeah.
You mean the bar didn't want to call you hang out?
Yeah.
They don't want your money anymore, huh?
They put a brand new bar in, and I thought for sure that they would go notice it.
They're like, we can't do this
We
without
can't afford
Casey.
this. We don't have Casey's money.
Right.
But no one has ever called me once. But my real friends, after they go, "Hey, what's going on, bud?" And they just had to distance themselves because for their own safety. And I understand that.
Which is a good friend, right? I mean, they're going to put boundaries up. And so looking at your friendships, and are they codependent? Are they other co-addicts? Are they controlling? So a lot of people with eating disorders end up in controlling relationships where the person tells you exactly what to do and how to do it, or the power kind of abusive relationships. And so really looking, or the knight on the white horse who's going to come in and save you. So really kind of looking at what types of relationships you are, distancing yourself from those co-addicts or those codependents, and really taking an inventory of your friendships and looking at who you surround yourself with. So I think that's a big one. And for a lot of my eating disorder patients, that's the hardest one because they've been in treatment. That's their only friends now. And a lot of people, they've removed themselves from everyone else. So building and starting over. And so I think that's one we work on and kind of set goals. So believe it or not, for me in college, this was a goal. This was a therapeutic assignment. I had to walk around campus and make eye contact with 3 people and smile.
I do that every day.
That for me was a goal because I couldn't even do that.
You're so
I couldn't even
make into yourself.
I couldn't even make eye contact with anyone.
Just walking around.
So now
at your own feet.
to now know that I can go speak in front of 800 people. People are like, "How can you do that?" Well, because I'm recovered, you know. And I finally patched that hole in my bucket. But back then, no, I couldn't even make eye contact and smile at 3 people. That's how basic I had to start.
I know we're going to run out of time, and I don't want to do that. And so these are some great things to put in your backpack or your parachute, whatever you call it, to help you with recovery. But I want you to take this time now for people listening at home, whether they might be going through their own struggles or loved ones of friends and family that are going through struggles. How do we talk to them? How do you approach somebody like this? I mean, I think it's probably similar to talking to somebody with an addiction, but what are some flags that, family members should be looking for, or if somebody's going to kind of check their own life, their own inventory?
Yeah, it's really hard because eating disorders are so secretive. So like I think we said in the beginning, the majority of people with eating disorders are normal weight or even overweight. They're not underweight. So the underweight individuals, people could notice them more, but you're not going to notice the majority of people with eating disorders. And so, again, looking at their food patterns, if they're getting more private with their eating, or, for parents, moms will call me and say, our food's all gone out of the pantry. The food's all gone out of the fridge. We know. Or we're seeing remnants on their toilet. We can tell they're purging. Very rarely will someone admit to purging.
Self-report.
Yeah. Very rarely. And so if parents think there's a problem, for example, on our website, on Center for Change's website, we have webinars that go back for years. We have articles. We have assessment things. We have hundreds of resources for families. But if you think there's a problem, definitely, have them meet with someone, kind of a professional. Because for me, I just kind of know the questions to ask. And again, when I meet with patients, if they already know I'm recovered, they'll usually tell me more than they're going to tell someone else because they're worried about that judgment and that shame.
You've been there. That's the same in substance abuse. If somebody's gone through what you've done or something similar, so you feel a kinship to them. You feel a little more open to share some of it.
What would you say to parents who send their child off to college and they're not seeing them every day? They're not able to see how do you stay in touch with your kids if you think they may be at risk for eating disorders when they're away from home?
So with all my patients that have struggled or even had depression or anxiety that go off to school, we kind of have what's called a weekly family check-in. So once a week when you talk to your family, you're going to check in on general kind of mental health. Like, how's the stress of school going? Any pressure with drinking, or how are you feeling about that? So we're checking in on a variety of things. But even asking them, like, how are you doing with food? Are you having any issues? So whatever your child's struggling with, if you kind of have a deal that, hey, every week we're going to check in while you're gone. With my adolescents, I like to do nightly check-ins, though. How's your day? How are you doing? We know with adolescents and depression now, it's so significant, and the suicide rates are increasing, that we need to be checking in with them. I just did a study, or just read a study on, for example, adolescents with untreated acne, for example. So we all had acne. I think I still had acne.
I still get it.
I know, into my 40s. And we would say just deal with it. But now they're saying, no. If you have a child that's already struggling with some depression, they have untreated acne, you need to get that acne treated. It could make them more depressed and lead to suicidal thoughts. One of the reasons, and we didn't get to this on my little parachute, is social media now. Really looking at
filters and all that stuff.
Yeah, and everyone is posting perfect pictures of themselves. It's making more and more kids feel insecure. And with my eating disorder patients, they're filtering their pictures, their weight down 20 pounds. They're totally changing their bodies.
And that brings me to the last conversation, or the last topic I wanted to hit on today, is kind of, because I've got two daughters, and they're both in competitive dance, and they do this, and I see what's going on, and I've got a 15-year-old, and she doesn't want to eat certain things, and I want to go, you're 15, eat whatever you want, your body,
Mm-hmm.
But am I doing the wrong thing by telling them to eat whatever? How do you open up that conversation?
So again, and I know this is swimming against the tide when we talk about intuitive eating, but intuitive eating really teaches that there's no good and bad foods. All food is good. All food is good in moderation. I've got a son on a competitive soccer team. If I roll up with a sleeve of Oreos and a Capri Sun, parents could get mad. Why are you bringing all this sugar? Well, next time I could bring carrot sticks. I don't know. I'm going to bring whatever because all food is good in moderation. So the minute we put rules on food, it doesn't work for people. That's why dieting doesn't work. There is not one diet out there that has 5-year replicable results to show weight loss. Not one. So we keep on prescribing diets. Diets are the opposite. Diets are making
money
people,
makers.
Yeah, they're making people gain weight. The research says that, yeah, you'll lose weight for sure if you follow the diet. You'll gain up to all of it back plus another 40%.
Because it's unsustainable.
Yeah.
It's not healthy for their weight, but self-esteem. When a person goes up and down and up and down, it's this pattern of failure, and it really destroys confidence. And the things that help keep us physically healthy actually start, I think, with our emotional health and how do we feel about ourselves. We tend to make choices that are better for us. So back to the idea of intuitive eating, if we feel good about who we are. But diets destroy that self-perception. Yeah.
Absolutely. So for parents, I think the one thing I could really stress is learn more about intuitive eating. Because if we're raising kids that are dieting, if we're raising kids that are super conscious of their food, I think it's going to backfire in the long term. We can see that. California is living proof. Now we have calories on everything. California has been doing it. Any restaurant chain that has over 120 restaurants has to have the calories on everything. California has been doing it for years. It's backfiring. Their population's gaining weight, not losing weight. And so it's not really working. So having new, different conversations with our kids is where we have to start. But I get it. We have an obesity epidemic. People are worried. They want to protect their kids. But what we're doing to protect them, I think, is causing a greater problem for them.
So last question. I know I'm full of last questions. But, everyone's saying that it's an opioid epidemic. Is the eating disorders, is it an epidemic? What kind of numbers are we seeing out there?
They will say up to 30 million people, but the truth is we honestly don't know because the increased rates of men that are having eating disorders, we don't really know the numbers. They could say 10 to 12 million. We don't really know because they're not coming to treatment. And they're taking, if you think it takes a woman 4 years to talk about an eating disorder, it's going to take a man 7 years. So we really don't know, but the guesses are around 30 million. But then the other estimate is if you have 60% of the U.S. population that's overweight or obese, of that, 60% of them probably have binge eating disorder, which we haven't even had a chance to really talk about, and they're not seeking treatment. Because if they come in our clinics and the chairs, are too small, they're not going to want to come back and have an appointment for us.
Right.
They're going to feel judged already.
I think that would be a great topic to have you back on.
Will you come back?
Oh, yeah, I'll come back. We can talk about just dieting.
But yeah, dieting and binge eating are enormous problems, and I'm glad you brought up the men because in the past, the prevailing culture has been we thought this was an issue for women, and men in droves are starting to have problems with this, and a lot of it's become something that I end up talking with my adolescent boys about a lot when they come in for treatment is because they're talking about dieting and they're talking about, and they're very susceptible to the social media problem, and so I think that would be a great future topic.
Yeah, that would be great.
Well, thank you very much for stopping by and sharing your wisdom and your story. I know it's going to make a difference, and we want to say thank you to everybody who tunes in weekly to hear Project Recovery. If you know somebody who needs some help, have them do what I did. Give Pinnacle Recovery Center a call. Project Recovery is a KSL podcast.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.